Hi y'all, today I want to talk about the Eclipse, the directive reward carbine for the Vanu sovereignty upon erasing 5 carbines. Now, in a complete nutshell, the Eclipse is fine. It is a solstice that gains heat in exchange for a slightly smaller magazine pool, it has an underbarrel impulse launcher built into it, and it has more versatile attachment options. In a nutshell, it is basically a straight upgrade on the regular solstice, but it's still not a super competitive weapon because it's still based on the solstice. That's pretty much the whole Eclipse in a nutshell. It is good, it is just not anything particularly good. It's not a must-have, it's fun to use, but it's certainly not a must-have. So, the Eclipse, just like the regular Solstice, is 698 at 143. Nothing unusual there. The reload speed is a flat 1.65, which is good because that's just the Solstice's soft reload, or short reload, whatever you want to call it. And your hip and aim stats are fine. Like, you've used the Solstice, it's gonna be pretty similar. You have slightly better hip accuracy though, because the Eclipse, like the other directive carbines, barring the Newton of course, has the laser sight built in, which is nice because it basically means you get to run 2 rail attachments. Just something to keep in mind. However, your muzzle velocity is garbage at 464 meters a second. That's kind of entering, like, CQC carbine territory, which is really going to limit the Eclipse at long range, which is unfortunately one of the places where this weapon is kind of better suited than others. So, the main problem with the Eclipse is, yes, it's based on a solstice, which means it's very versatile. Unfortunately, this means that it does not have very good DPS. Don't get me wrong, the recoil pattern is reasonably easy to control. As long as you're hitting shots, you will kill people. And because you're a light assault, you should have the positioning. But you're still going to have that DPS problem no matter what you do. And unfortunately, that does kind of weigh it down in comparison to something like a Pulse RC, a VX6-7, a Serpent, where, sometimes you're just going to lose because you don't have the DPS to compete. So, as for the Eclipse itself, for your optics, take whatever you prefer, but I wouldn't go higher than a 2x personally. I'm a fan of the 1x on it because I find it works slightly better in the close to mid ranges, but you can run the 2x, or if you want to be completely silly and run the 4, be my guest. As for the barrel slot, this is basically where you're going to determine how you want to play your Eclipse. In my humble opinion, there's a couple different builds that work here. I personally like to use mine as kind of an aim down sights hybrid weapon. So, personally, I take the compensator to improve my vertical recoil and fight better at range. I keep the underbarrel shotgun, because I find as a close range tool, it actually works quite excellently, and I run soft point. In general, you should just be running soft point anyway, but we'll talk about unstable ammo once you reach the ammo slot. But, because you have the built-in laser sight, the short barrel is perfectly fine too, because it basically means you get to take a short barrel laser, and then you can take a grip, the standard impulse, the underbarrel shotty. Like, you can absolutely use this gun as a hipfire gun. I personally don't think it's as competitive as something like a VX6-7 or a Serpent, but you totally can do that if you want to. The flash step is fine if you don't want to commit to a barrel. The suppressor's fine. I mean, sure you get to be silent, but the velocity just tanks even more. That one's up to you. Depends how you play your light assault. Only attachment that I would stay away from is, of course, the heavy barrel. There's not really just much of a reason to use it in general in this game, but it's just not worth the pick. As for your rail slot, so if you don't pick anything, you get the impulse launcher. It's the same impulse launcher that's found in the Punisher when you have the class-specific barrel equipped, and it's nice. It's just a nice tool. There's not really a whole lot to say out otherwise. You can use it for great mobility, especially if you know how to abuse your jet drifting. And when I say jet drifting, I mean general drifting. You don't need to have drifter jets for it. I'll probably cover that as a unique mechanic in another video, something to be aware of. But if you like mobility, absolutely keep the impulse launcher. It's a great little tool. It's also worth noting that, it's free, it's built into the gun, and the only other impulse launcher you can get is on the Punisher, which, unless you have the SMG secondary perk, means that you have to pick between the Punisher and the Eclipse. So, forward grip is fine if you want to really specialize into an aim-down sights build, but at that point, it really just becomes a beefy Solstice with heat. So I probably wouldn't. You can definitely work the smoke launcher if you just want to be that one guy that spams smoke. I probably wouldn't recommend it given the other options here, but if Rockchat man, if you wanna use smoke, you can. I personally like the underbarrel shotgun. So The underbarrel shotgun does effectively work as a pump action. As long as all pellets hit, you will kill. Problem is, you only get one shot. And barring the funny view model bug that happens if, I believe this is unique to having the quote-unquote old underbarrel shotgun before the directive weapon overhaul. But, like, the pellet spread is okay. But personally what I find this pellet spread, or this underbarrel shotgun, is truly useful for is camping corners and peeking. It's also very good for tower stomping. So say you're holding a corner, say you're holding this doorway, you can peek out, chuck the underbarrel around, and, you know, if someone's there, you can click them, and they die. Or if you're tower stomping and you have lots of room to move around, you can kind of just click people and quickly run away. Problem is, you basically need every single pellet here to land to get a kill, so when it misses, oh boy, does it miss. And you will die. So, be very careful with how you use it, but once you get it down, it is, in my opinion, a very nice tool. As for your ammo slot, soft point or unstable. Well, unless you're really, really trying to build a wacky build, run soft point. Sure, I will not deny that in theory you could make an airborne carbine of sorts, running, say, the short barrel, I don't know, your impulse launcher, and then taking unstable and just hip-firing the thing in the air everywhere. Do I think it's the most effective way to play the weapon? Not really. It is unique to the Eclipse, though, so if you want to run unstable ammo, be my guest. I just generally would not recommend it. So, let's head to the only fight I see in the con, which is Helios Solar. It is currently off-hours Connery at 2:04 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon. So, you know, it's off-hours. Sure, it's not live play, but it's, or like fully primetime play, but it, you know, it should give you a good indication of how the weapon plays. For a personal level, the Eclipse is my most used weapon in the game. I've put more kills on it than anything else. I think it's extremely well-rounded, but I also think it's important to recognize that it has a lot of shortcomings. For example, you get heat. However, with only 27 rounds, this heat is generally not enough to make a massive difference in your play. Sure, you get unlimited ammo, which, don't get me wrong, can be a useful trait, especially on light assault if you're maximizing your ammo. But in terms of total uptime and sustain, yeah, I wouldn't call it a huge difference. As I talked about in the Scorpios video, the light assault usually can make a lot of room to earn time to reload. Like, you're not traditionally too worried about stressing uptime.
Is not the path of enlightenment.
So, don't get me wrong, there are times when heat will save you. For example, there, I probably would not have got that second kill if I didn't have heat. But on the whole, I would hardly call heat a super useful mechanic. It's nice to have, don't get me wrong, but it's not going to be nearly as strong as it is in, say, the Beetle Geese. Carbines and light assaults just don't really mesh well with what heat really likes out of a weapon. But, you know what, it can save you from time to time, and honestly, you're better off with it than you aren't. And you only pay 3 rounds to get it, so it's not like you're losing out on a whole lot. That is a Vanguard. God, I love the bugged animations for this, for this thing. Let me just casually hold my Eclipse like a commissioner. Oh, that's amazing. So, yeah, the Eclipse. It's alright. As for the directive grind itself, it's not bad. However, I don't think it's something that you need to rush to do. If you like playing Light Assault and you really like your carbines, it's a good reward. It is a good reward. It feels fun to use. It has some versatile options that you don't really get elsewhere, like unstable ammo, the impulse launcher. But it's not a particularly strong weapon. It's fun to use, and it has interesting stuff, but it's not. Most of the time, you're probably better off with a VX6-7, a Pulse RC, a Serpent. It's just not. On performance, it doesn't really equal what the best of the Vanu has to offer. It's not like a Beetlegeese where, you know, it is arguably the best weapon in its class, where it's kind of fighting with the Orion for that role. The Eclipse is just good. Like, it's nothing outstanding, but you know what, it's good to use. It feels comfortable. There's an infiltrator up here. There you are. That's basically the Eclipse in a nutshell. It's good, but it's not really competitive. I guess that's probably the best way to describe it. It's a good weapon, it's just not super, super competitive. But, you know, you're a light assault. You have superior mobility. You can always flank your targets, which can help make up for the Eclipse's shortcomings in the raw DPS department. So, you know, you can certainly make it work. It's not like it's bad. It's just kind of mediocre when it comes to downright killing other players. So, like, it's still good, it's just kind of eh. The real problem with the Eclipse, unfortunately, lies in the directive line. The Eclipse on itself is fine. I would say it's a good reward. It's perfect for a directive reward weapon. You know, it's got some wacky gimmicks, but it's not anything super like competitive. It's just kind of like an interesting, neat little reward. However, you do have to consider the Vanu Carbine lineup here. It's not that good. You're outside of the Pulse RC, the VX6 Attack 7, and the Serpent, depending on if you like the Serpent or not. I personally do not. You're really only looking at 2, maybe 3 properly good carbines here. And then, you know, then you're looking at a Solstice, an NS11C, a Zenith, a Prominence. It's not a very good directive in terms of the weapons you're using. Sure, it's fine, and you have some good weapons in there, but Solstice and Zenith are not particularly good, or just okay. And they're not very fun weapons to use either. I mean, the Pulse RC is fun to use, the VX6X7 and the Serpent are fun to use, and they're reasonably good. But the other weapons are not fun to use and are just okay. It can feel like a bit of a slog to get through. It's not a bad directive reward, but if you're really looking for a directive carbine, I would honestly advise going for a Fortuna instead. It is a more competitive carbine, toe-to-toe with the other directive carbines, and notably, NC has some of the best carbines in the game. Like, there's no denying that the NC carbine lineup is just absolutely great. It might honestly be the best on average weapon class per faction in the entire game. It's a way more enjoyable directive with way better guns. So, if you play Vanu, you want a carbine, cool, get the Eclipse. It's a neat little reward. It's just, the directive itself might be a little painful, and it's not a super competitive option. If you just want a directive carbine, and you don't care which faction you get it on, I would go for the Fortuna instead. I will not make a comment on the trap shot, as I do not personally own it, and I have not heard enough about it following the arsenal changes. Or even, although it's not quite as good as it used to be, you can also grab a Newton instead. That said, because I have the option, I want to demonstrate what I mean with the underbarrel on this gun. The jet drifting, I so-called talked about. I'm probably going to cover this in another video, because this is something I don't think a lot of players, newer players, are very well aware of. Can I actually not untake the... Damn, okay, I can't take out the underbarrel shotgun, never mind. This is, on the topic of jet drifting, I'm not super sure how to demonstrate this without, a jump pad. But it's a mechanic that I'd like to cover in a video at some point, that I don't think a lot of newer players are aware of. And I'd be interested to know if people are into, say, a dive into that specific mechanic, because I think it's a very key mechanic to know for light assault play, because it greatly improves your regular mobility. If I manage to make enough certs here, I'll show a demonstration of it off with the underbarrel. But I might make a deep dive into it on another video if people are into that. Just something I'm kind of floating. Alright, there we go. Now we have 100 certs. So now, as soon as I die, I can show you what I mean.
Swapping battery, cover me.
Fortunately, I'm not dying. Honestly, buddy, please just kill me. There we go. Thank you. Okay, now I can actually buy, quote-unquote, the underbarrel shotgun that I've been using the entire time. Cool. So, the impulse grenade, naturally, there we go, shoots you up. So what you can do, you throw it at the side, and then, okay, I need a bigger area to work with this. So this plays into the jet drifting mechanic that I will intend probably to cover a video on. So what you're going to want to do, say, if you want to get extra distance with your impulse grenades, you're going to shoot it behind you, and then you're going to look sideways to the direction you want to go, and just kind of hold the spacebar without using any movement keys. This also works with jump pads, and basically what it allows you to do, this allows you to keep momentum while still preserving direction. You won't have, if you need to turn, you just simply move your camera around. Do not touch any of your movement keys, though, as that will generally cut at your momentum. So, I do intend to cover jet drifting as its own mechanic in a video at some point, but if people, or at least if people enter that, I will. But it's just something to be aware of when using impulse grenades, or really any kind of light assault play. Whether it's with grav lifts, jump pads, impulse grenades, anything that can kind of push the player around. Being able to jet drift effectively will grant you some increased movement, and it's just generally very nice to reposition. There are some absolute shenanigans you can get up to with jump pads when crossing extremely large distances. Fortunately, you need to get a really good bounce with impulse grenades to make the most out of jet drifting, but it's still a useful tool to know regardless. So, pretty much all I have to say on the Eclipse and how it works. It's just the shorthand of it is it's a decent carbine. It's got some mechanical uniqueness to it compared to other Vanu weapons. But I must say that on the whole, it's probably not the best directive weapon. It's probably not the best directive reward. If you're looking for a competitive option, look elsewhere. And I recommend on the whole that if you're just getting into grinding directive weapons and you want to start a directive carbine to be your quote-unquote first directive weapon, I would highly recommend going for the Fortuna on NC instead. Because the grind there is easier and it's arguably a better reward than the Eclipse. But you know, it's a good carbine, you know, it just feels comfortable to use. That's why I've put, God, like 2,100 kills into this stupid thing or something. So. Can someone please kill me so I can stop? There we go. So, yeah, that's the Eclipse for you. It's a good carbine. It's just kind of, you know, you feel that DPS hit, unfortunately. So, thanks all, and I will see you another time.